On October 15, 2019, a baby monitor meant to protect a child became the evidence that would destroy a police officer's life and end a young mother's. The small device, tucked innocently in a toddler's bedroom in Dubai's international city, recorded more than a child's sleep patterns, captured a murder. When neighbors heard the desperate cries of 3-year-old Omar echoing through thin apartment walls at 2 a.m., they thought he was having a nightmare. Building security found something far worse. The boy was alone, standing beside his mother's lifeless body on their small living room couch, her eyes staring at the ceiling, a silk scarf loosely wrapped around her neck. The scene looked like suicide. Dubai police initially treated it as another tragic case of a struggling single mother who couldn't bear the pressure anymore. But what they found in that baby monitor would expose a web of lies that reached into Dubai police headquarters itself, revealing how a decorated officer used his badge to hunt vulnerable women and how technology meant to protect became the voice of the dead. This isn't just a story about murder. It's about the dangerous intersection of power and vulnerability in a city where traditional values clash with modern reality, where single mothers face impossible choices, and where the uniform that should represent protection can hide the darkest predatory instincts. Welcome to True Crime Anatomy. I'm your host, and today's case will shatter everything you think you know about trust, authority, and the price of desperation. If you're new here, subscribe now because this story has never been told completely until today. The official reports sanitize the truth, but the evidence tells a far more disturbing tale of systematic manipulation and calculated murder. Meet Nadia Hassan, 29 years old, a woman who had already escaped one monster only to fall into the trap of another. Nadia lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the 8th floor of a faded building in International City, where the elevators rarely worked and the hallways smelled of cooking spices and broken dreams. Every morning, she would carry her 3-year-old son down 8 flights of stairs because she couldn't afford to live anywhere better. Every evening, she would climb back up, exhausted from working double shifts at a call center while cleaning offices at night. But Nadia wasn't just surviving. She was fighting. 2 years earlier, she had done something that required extraordinary courage in Dubai's traditional society. She had divorced her abusive husband, a man who had turned their marriage into a daily nightmare of violence and control. The divorce had cost her everything. Her family had disowned her for bringing shame upon them. Her ex-husband's family had threatened her. Most of Dubai's Arab community had turned their backs on a woman who dared to leave her husband. Nadia had already survived one man who tried to destroy her. She never imagined the man she trusted to protect her would be the one to succeed. In her small apartment, decorated with her son's drawings and filled with second-hand furniture, Nadia had created something precious. Safety, peace, hope. She worked 16-hour days to pay rent, counting every dirham, choosing between groceries and electricity bills. But when Omar laughed at cartoons on their old television, when he fell asleep in her arms after she read him stories in Arabic and English, Nadia knew every sacrifice was worth it. She had installed a baby monitor in Omar's room not out of paranoia, but out of love. Working late nights meant leaving him with elderly neighbors, and the device let her check on him remotely, ensuring he was safe even when she couldn't be there. The monitor was one of her few technological luxuries, a small investment in peace of mind that cost her a week's worth of meals. Now meet Officer Khalid Mansour, 38 years old, 15 years on Dubai Police Force, a man whose badge had become his hunting license. To everyone who knew him, Khalid was the perfect police officer. His colleagues respected his dedication to the narcotics division, where he had built a reputation for thorough investigations and successful prosecutions. His superiors praised his community outreach work. His family admired his devotion to his wife and 2 teenage children, who lived in a spacious villa in Jumeirah, where swimming pools and luxury cars were neighborhood standards. But Khalid had a secret that would make your blood run cold. In his private home office, hidden behind family photos and police commendations, he kept detailed files on vulnerable women. Not criminal suspects, targets. For 3 years, Khalid had been using his police authority to identify and exploit desperate women throughout Dubai. Single mothers, divorced women, abuse victims seeking help. He had perfected a system of manipulation that was as calculating as it was cruel. To his colleagues, Khalid was the perfect officer. To his family, the devoted father. But Nadia would discover that uniforms can hide the darkest secrets. The Dubai of 2019 was a city in transition, where gleaming skyscrapers cast shadows on communities struggling to balance tradition with rapid modernization. For single mothers like Nadia, this tension created an impossible social landscape. Traditional society offered no support for divorced women, while modern reality demanded they work and survive independently. They existed in a gray area where they were neither fully accepted nor completely abandoned. Police authority in Dubai carried special weight. Officers were viewed not just as law enforcement, but as protectors of social order, representatives of stability in a rapidly changing world. When someone in uniform offered help, questioning their motives seemed not just ungrateful, but almost blasphemous. This unquestioned respect created perfect hunting grounds for predators who understood how to weaponize trust. What happens when the person meant to protect you becomes your greatest threat? When desperation meets manipulation. When a small device designed to safeguard a child becomes witness to its mother's murder. The answers lie in a year-long psychological campaign that began with professional concern and ended with premeditated murder. A story where the baby monitor that failed to protect Nadia became the voice that spoke for her in death, ensuring her killer would face justice even when she could no longer speak for herself. What started as protection would become obsession, and what began as help would end in horror. But there's another layer to this twisted story, one that reveals how society's failures created the perfect conditions for a predator to thrive and how technology, in the end, became the unexpected guardian of truth. 3 months before her murder, Nadia Hassan walked into Jumeirah police station carrying a folder of screenshots, voice messages, and photographs that documented her nightmare. Her ex-husband had escalated from psychological torture to physical threats, and she was terrified he would follow through on his promise to take Omar away from her forever. The marble floors of Jumeirah police station gleamed under fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the crumbling concrete of International City where Nadia lived. She felt out of place in her modest abaya among the polished uniforms and expensive suits, clutching her evidence folder like a lifeline. When the receptionist directed her to the domestic violence unit, Nadia's hands trembled as she knocked on the office door. Officer Khalid Mansour opened that door and changed her life forever. He was everything Nadia needed him to be in that moment. Professional, concerned, reassuring. When she spread her evidence across his desk, showing him the threatening messages from her ex-husband, the photos of her bruised arms from their marriage, the custody papers he was threatening to forge, Khalid listened with the focused attention of someone who genuinely cared. "You've been through hell," he said, his voice soft with sympathy. "But you're safe now. I'm going to personally ensure this stops." Khalid didn't just take her statement. He walked her through the restraining order process, explained her legal rights, and gave her his direct phone number. "Call me any time," he insisted. "Day or night. This is what we're here for." From the moment Khalid took her case, Nadia felt safe for the first time in years. She had no idea she was walking into a different kind of trap. What Nadia didn't know was that Khalid had been watching her before she even entered his office. Her case had been assigned to another officer initially, but Khalid had specifically requested the transfer after reviewing her file. Single mother, divorced, financially struggling, socially isolated. She fit his profile perfectly. The grooming began immediately, disguised as exceptional police work. Khalid would drive by her apartment building during his patrols, not just once but multiple times, always ready with a plausible explanation. "Just making sure you're safe," he would say when she spotted him from her window. "Your ex-husband hasn't been around, has he?" These check-ins became routine. Then they became personal. Within weeks, Khalid was calling Nadia after his shifts, supposedly to update her on the case but increasingly to ask about her day, her struggles, her feelings. "You sound tired," he would say with genuine concern. "It must be so hard doing this alone." These conversations stretched longer each time, creating an intimacy that felt natural but was carefully calculated. Khalid understood exactly what Nadia needed: validation, support, and most importantly, someone who made her feel valued rather than burdensome. He praised her strength as a mother, her courage in leaving her abusive marriage, her determination to build a better life. "Most women wouldn't have your resilience," he told her. "Omar is lucky to have you." The financial assistance started small. When Nadia mentioned struggling to pay Omar's nursery fees, Khalid showed up at her apartment with an envelope containing 500 dirhams. "It's not charity," he insisted when she protested. "It's what decent people do for each other." When her car broke down and she couldn't afford repairs, he appeared with another envelope. When her electricity was about to be cut off, somehow the bill was mysteriously paid. Khalid convinced Nadia that he was the only one who truly understood her struggles. He isolated her emotionally by positioning himself as her sole source of support and understanding. "Other people judge you," he would say during their late-night phone calls. "They don't understand what you've been through, but I see your strength." This was predatory behavior disguised as protection. Khalid was using classic manipulation tactics, creating dependency, fostering isolation, and positioning himself as indispensable. He identified Nadia's vulnerabilities and weaponized her own survival instincts against her. The progression from professional concern to personal interest to romantic involvement was so gradual that Nadia never saw it coming. Khalid's visits became longer, more frequent. Their conversations grew more intimate. He began staying for dinner, playing with Omar, acting like the father figure the boy had never had. The first time Khalid kissed her, Nadia felt guilty and grateful in equal measure. Here was a good man, a respected officer, who saw value in her despite her past. When he held her in her small living room while Omar slept in the next room, she felt protected in ways she had never experienced. What Nadia experienced as love, Khalid calculated as control. He maintained his double life with military precision. His wife and children never suspected their devoted husband and father was conducting an affair. His colleagues saw only his professional competence. He compartmentalized his life so completely that he could play the perfect family man at his Jumeirah villa and the protective lover at Nadia's International City apartment without any apparent psychological conflict. For Nadia, however, the relationship became everything. Khalid filled the emotional void left by her family's abandonment and her ex-husband's abuse. She began planning a future that included him, imagining Omar calling him father, dreaming of the stability and security he represented. During one of these intimate evenings, as Khalid whispered promises about protecting her and Omar forever, the baby monitor in the next room silently recorded every word. The small device meant to protect her son would eventually expose the truth about his mother's killer. Neither of them paid attention to the innocent technology that was documenting their relationship. The baby monitor, with its continuous recording capability and automatic memory storage, captured everything. Their conversations, their arguments, their most private moments. What began as a tool for a working mother to ensure her child's safety was unknowingly building a detailed audio record of manipulation, control, and eventually murder. As their relationship deepened, the evidence accumulated. Every promise Khalid made and later broke. Every manipulation disguised as care. Every moment when his mask slipped and revealed the calculating predator beneath the protective facade. The technology that was supposed to safeguard Omar was secretly becoming the voice that would speak for his murdered mother. What happens when protection becomes possession? When help becomes manipulation? When the person you trust most is secretly planning your destruction? The answers were being recorded night after night, in a child's bedroom, by a device that would ultimately ensure justice prevailed even when its owner could no longer fight for it. But there's another layer to this twisted story, one that would turn Nadia from grateful victim to desperate woman willing to risk everything for a future that existed only in her imagination. By September 2019, just weeks before her death, Nadia began asking the questions that would seal her fate. It started innocently enough during one of their intimate evenings in her small apartment, Omar sleeping peacefully in the next room while she traced patterns on Khalid's chest. "When will you tell your family about us?" she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of months of hope and growing frustration. Khalid's body tensed immediately. This wasn't the first time she had brought up their future. and each conversation left him more irritated than the last. "It's complicated," he replied, the same response he had given for weeks. "My children are at a sensitive age. The timing isn't right." But Nadia was no longer satisfied with vague promises and deflections. The woman who had once been grateful for scraps of attention now wanted the full meal of commitment and recognition. She had sacrificed her reputation, her already limited social connections, and her financial independence for this relationship. She deserved more than secret meetings and hidden love. "I'm tired of being your secret," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Omar asks why Uncle Khalid can't come to parent events at nursery. I have to lie to my neighbors about why you're here so often. I'm tired of pretending we're nothing when you mean everything to me." As Nadia dreamed of a life together, Khalid was calculating how to keep her quiet. The conversations that had once brought them closer now became battlegrounds. Nadia wanted integration into his life, introduction to his family, acknowledgement of their relationship. Khalid wanted maintenance of the status quo, where he could enjoy the benefits of her devotion without any of the consequences. "You knew what this was when it started," he would say during increasingly heated arguments. "I never promised you anything permanent." But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. The baby monitor in Omar's room had recorded months of whispered promises, declarations of love, and discussions of their future together. Khalid had painted pictures of a life where they could be together openly, where Omar would have a father figure, where Nadia would never have to struggle alone again. Those promises had been lies designed to maintain her compliance, but Nadia had believed them with her whole heart. The pressure was mounting from every direction. Nadia's financial situation was deteriorating. The small amounts of money Khalid provided weren't enough to cover her increasing expenses, and her emotional dependency on him made it harder to focus on work. She was falling behind on rent, struggling to pay for Omar's needs, and facing the possibility of eviction. More devastating was her social isolation. The few friends she had maintained after her divorce had distanced themselves as her relationship with Khalid became obvious. Dubai's tight-knit communities didn't approve of single mothers conducting affairs with married men, regardless of the circumstances. Nadia found herself more alone than ever, with Khalid as her only source of emotional support. Meanwhile, Khalid was facing his own pressures. His wife had begun asking questions about his late-night phone calls and frequent overtime shifts. His colleagues were starting to notice his preoccupation and decreased focus on work. Most dangerously, there were whispers in the department about his unusual attention to certain domestic violence cases. The relationship that had once been his perfect escape was becoming a liability he couldn't afford. The final deterioration began in early October, just days before the murder. During what would become their last peaceful evening together, Nadia made her ultimate demand. "I want to meet your children," she said, watching Khalid's face carefully for his reaction. "If we're going to be a family, they need to know about me and Omar." Khalid's mask slipped completely. The gentle, protective officer vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "That will never happen," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth she had grown to depend on. "My family is off limits." "Then what exactly am I to you?" Nadia demanded, her voice rising despite Omar sleeping nearby. "Am I just someone you use when you're bored with your real life?" The argument that followed was unlike anything they had experienced before. Accusations flew, buried resentments exploded, and both revealed truths they had kept hidden for months. Neither of them realized that their final argument was being recorded by the very device meant to protect Nadia's child. It was during this confrontation that Nadia made a discovery that would change everything. As she moved around the apartment in her anger, straightening cushions and cleaning obsessively to channel her frustration, she knocked over Omar's baby monitor. When she picked it up to return it to his room, she noticed the small digital display showing stored files. Curious and still emotional from their fight, she pressed the playback button. Her own voice filled the small apartment, clear and unmistakable, discussing intimate details of their relationship. Then Khalid's voice, equally clear, making promises he had no intention of keeping. Hours of conversations, arguments, and private moments had been automatically recorded and stored. For the first time in their relationship, Nadia held the power. It would cost her everything. The realization hit her like lightning. Here was proof of everything. His promises, his lies, his manipulation. More importantly, here was evidence that could destroy his marriage, his career, his carefully constructed double life. The baby monitor had captured it all. That night, after Khalid left following another inconclusive argument about their future, Nadia sat alone in her living room listening to months of recorded conversations. She heard her own desperation, her growing dependency, her transformation from a strong survivor into someone who begged for scraps of attention. But she also heard his calculated responses, his careful manipulation, his promises designed solely to maintain control over her. The audio files revealed the relationship for what it truly was: a systematic exploitation of her vulnerability by someone who had never intended to honor any of his commitments. The next morning, October 14, 2019, Nadia made the decision that would seal both their fates. She selected the most damaging recording, a conversation where Khalid explicitly discussed leaving his wife and building a life with her and Omar. She attached it to a text message with words that would trigger his final, fatal rage. "If you don't tell your wife the truth, I will." In that moment, Khalid stopped seeing Nadia as a lover and started seeing her as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The hunter had become the hunted, but this time the stakes were life and death. October 15, 2019, 6:47 p.m. Officer Khalid Mansour stared at his phone screen, hands trembling with rage and terror. The 30-second audio file Nadia had sent contained enough evidence to destroy everything he had built over 15 years. His own voice, unmistakable, promising to leave his wife, discussing their future together, admitting love that could never be explained away as professional concern. In 30 seconds of audio, Nadia had weaponized months of his lies against him. Everything he had worked for would be gone. His wife discovering the affair, his children learning about his betrayal, his colleagues hearing evidence of unprofessional conduct, his superiors launching investigations that would expose his pattern of exploiting vulnerable women. In that moment, Khalid made the decision that would transform him from predator to murderer. He checked his service weapon and started the 20-minute drive from Jumeirah's luxury to International City's desperation. Meanwhile, Nadia prepared dinner in her small kitchen, completely unaware she had just signed her death warrant. Omar played quietly with toy cars on the living room floor, calling out to his mother in the cheerful voice of a child who felt safe and loved. The apartment was filled with ordinary domestic sounds. Rice bubbling on the stove, air conditioning humming, Omar's happy chatter as he created elaborate stories for his vehicles. On the kitchen counter, Nadia's phone lay silent, the sent message that would cost her life already delivered. She had convinced herself that sending the audio file was right. Khalid needed to understand she was serious about their relationship, wouldn't accept being hidden forever. She imagined tonight's conversation would finally force him to choose her, to commit to the future they had discussed. Nadia had no idea that Khalid had already made his choice, and that choice was murder. At 7:15 p.m., heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor outside apartment 8C. Nadia heard them approaching and smiled, thinking Khalid had come to discuss their future. She checked her appearance in the hallway mirror, smoothed Omar's hair, and prepared to welcome the man she loved. The banging was violent and urgent, completely unlike Khalid's usual gentle knocks. When Nadia opened the door, she immediately knew something was wrong. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury, eyes wild with panic and rage. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past her without invitation. Omar looked up from his toys, confused by Uncle Khalid's harsh tone and angry expression. "Mama?" he said uncertainly. "Go to your room, Habibi," Nadia said softly, maternal instincts recognizing danger. "Play with your cars there." As soon as Omar disappeared into his bedroom, Khalid exploded. "How dare you threaten me?" he screamed. "How dare you try to destroy my family?" Nadia backed toward the kitchen, hands raised peacefully. "I wasn't threatening you. I just want honesty. I want what you promised me. I promised you nothing. Khalid's response was savage, all pretense of love stripped away. You were a convenience, a distraction. Did you really think I would leave my family for someone like you? The words hit Nadia like physical blows. Someone like you. All her fears about worthlessness, her damaged status as a divorced single mother, crystallized in that phrase. Give me your phone, Khalid demanded, advancing. All of it. Every recording, every file, every piece of evidence you think you have. I deleted everything after I sent it to you, Nadia lied desperately. There's nothing left. But Khalid knew better. He had noticed the baby monitor, understood the technology. The baby monitor, he said, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. It records everything, doesn't it? In that moment, Nadia realized her fatal miscalculation. She had thought the audio file was leverage to force honesty. Instead, it was evidence of a crime that could destroy him, and he would do anything to eliminate that evidence, including eliminating her. Khalid, please, she whispered, backing against the kitchen counter. Think about Omar. Think about what you're doing. But Khalid was beyond rational thought. Months of careful control had evaporated in the face of exposure and ruin. The baby monitor that had recorded their relationship was now recording its violent end, capturing every word of the argument that would conclude with murder. When his hands found her throat, Nadia fought with the desperation of a mother who knew her child needed her to survive. She clawed at his arms, tried to scream, attempted to reach the knife block. But Khalid was stronger, fueled by panic and rage, determined to silence the only witness to his crimes. The struggle lasted less than 2 minutes. Khalid's hands tightened around her neck, cutting off her air, her voice, her life. As consciousness faded, Nadia's last thought was of Omar, playing peacefully in the next room, unaware his mother was dying meters away. The apartment fell silent except for Khalid's heavy breathing and Omar playing quietly in his bedroom, still trusting that Mama would call him for dinner soon. In devastating irony, the baby monitor continued recording. The device meant to protect Omar had failed to save his mother, but it documented every second of her murder, preserving evidence that would bring her killer to justice. Khalid stood over Nadia's lifeless body, police training taking over as shock replaced rage. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, but still had a chance to avoid consequences if he acted quickly and intelligently. Moving with methodical precision, he began staging the scene. He positioned Nadia's body on the living room couch, arranged her limbs to suggest suicide, and loosely wrapped one of her scarves around her neck to support the narrative he was creating. Using his shirt, he carefully wiped down every surface he might have touched, erasing fingerprints and DNA evidence. He checked his clothing for blood or fibers, straightened the apartment to remove signs of struggle, and prepared to return to normal life as if nothing had happened. But in his panic and haste, Khalid made one crucial mistake. In all his careful cleanup, he forgot about the small device in Omar's room that had recorded everything. The baby monitor that had captured months of manipulation and lies had now preserved the evidence of murder. As he prepared to leave, Khalid heard Omar's sleepy voice calling from the bedroom, "Mama? Where's dinner?" Without answering the child who would soon discover his mother's body, Khalid slipped out of the apartment and drove back to Jumeirah, where his wife and children were waiting for their husband and father to come home. At 2:17 a.m. on October 16, 2019, neighbors were awakened by desperate wailing that seemed to go on forever. 3-year-old Omar had discovered his mother's body and was calling for her to wake up, his small voice echoing through International City's thin walls. Mrs. Fatima, the elderly woman next door, knocked first. When no adult answered, she called building security. The maintenance man found Omar standing by the front door, tears streaming down his face, repeating the same Arabic phrase, "Mama won't wake up." Inside apartment 8C, everything looked exactly as Khalid intended. Nadia's body on the couch, scarf around her neck, positioned to suggest a desperate woman who couldn't bear single motherhood's pressures. Dubai police arrived within minutes, making their initial assessment. Apparent suicide, tragic but unfortunately common among isolated single mothers. But forensic science would expose Khalid's carefully constructed lie. The autopsy revealed what the scene couldn't hide. Manual strangulation marks beneath the scarf placement. Defensive wounds on Nadia's arms and hands. Bruising patterns inconsistent with self-inflicted death. Dr. Sarah Al-Mahmoud, Dubai's chief medical examiner, was categorical. This woman fought for her life. Despite Khalid's careful cleanup, forensic teams found traces of his DNA under Nadia's fingernails, his skin cells on her clothing, hair fibers that didn't belong to her or Omar. Phone records revealed the pattern of calls, messages, and most damaging, the audio file Nadia had sent hours before her death. But the breakthrough that sealed Khalid's fate came from the most unexpected source. While investigating Omar's welfare, social workers discovered the baby monitor in his bedroom. What they found stored in its memory changed everything. Hours of recorded conversations between Nadia and Khalid. Evidence of manipulation, financial control, and emotional abuse. And finally, the complete audio record of October 15th. The argument, the threats, the struggle, and the moment when Nadia's voice stopped forever. Technology that failed to protect Nadia became the voice that spoke for her in death. Officer Khalid Mansour was arrested at Jumeirah police station on October 22nd, exactly 1 week after the murder. His colleagues watched in shock as their respected narcotics detective was led away in handcuffs, charged with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and abuse of authority. The trial exposed the depth of Khalid's deception. Prosecutors played the baby monitor recordings in court, forcing everyone to hear Nadia's final moments. His defense attempted to claim passion and provocation, but evidence revealed systematic predation, not momentary rage. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all charges. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. But the story didn't end with Khalid's conviction. The case forced Dubai to confront uncomfortable truths about power, vulnerability, and protection. New protocols were established for police interactions with domestic violence victims. Oversight committees monitored officer conduct. Training programs addressed specific vulnerabilities of single mothers and divorced women in traditional societies. Omar, now 4 years old, was placed with Nadia's sister in Canada, far from his trauma. The international custody arrangement ensured he would grow up surrounded by love rather than stigma. A trust fund, established through civil litigation against Khalid's assets, would provide for his education and future. The baby monitor that recorded his mother's murder was entered into evidence and later destroyed, but its impact lasted forever. The case established legal precedents for digital evidence in domestic violence cases and highlighted how everyday technology could serve justice when human systems failed. Nadia's story became a catalyst for change. Women's advocacy groups used her case to push for stronger protection laws. Social workers developed new protocols for identifying and protecting vulnerable mothers. Police departments across the UAE implemented stricter oversight of officers' interactions with civilian victims. What this case ultimately revealed was both devastating and enlightening. It showed how perfectly predators could hide behind authority and respectability, how traditional values could be weaponized against the vulnerable, how technology could become both trap and salvation, and how one woman's death could force an entire society to examine its failures and commit to doing better. Khalid Mansour remains in Dubai Central Prison, serving his life sentence in the same city where he once enforced the law. His family fled to Jordan, destroyed by the revelation of his crimes. His victims, including Nadia, finally had their voices heard through the justice system that had initially failed to protect them. The baby monitor that was meant to keep Omar safe had failed in its primary mission. But in recording the truth of what happened that terrible night, it ensured that his mother's killer would face justice and that other women might be protected from similar fates. In the end, Nadia's story became exactly what she would have wanted. A shield for other vulnerable women and a demand that those in power be held accountable for their actions. Her voice, preserved in digital memory, continued to speak long after she could no longer speak for herself. Technology had failed to protect her, but it succeeded in ensuring she would never be forgotten.